the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.
A state of control.
This is A State of Control, episode 13, recorded Monday, September 29th, 2014. Let there be light. This is A State of Control, the monthly broadcast brought to you by the fine folks at AVNation, looking at, well, the state of control and automation. With us, as always, Mr. Steve Greenblatt, the chief muckety-muck over at Control Concepts. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Good to be back. We're on episode 13, which means that we're past the year.
Long time no see, by the way, Steve.
Yeah.
I don't know if my wife is more worried or your fiance, one of the two.
We're getting into a good routine.
Exactly. So where are we headed next week? I'm headed back to Little Rock, so you can come with me if you want. You know.
Oh boy.
Yeah. I actually found a very nice place called Slim Chickens. Very good chicken strips. So, also with us is Richard Fregosa, Fregosa Design. How are you, sir?
Mellow Monday greetings from the West Coast. All good. Doing good. Yeah, I've been on the East Coast schedule, so I've been up for 5 hours. So.
Oh wow! Holy cow, dude. That's about how long I've been up. So, also with us,
people are in undisclosed locations nearby. So.
Are you going to write about this one? I know about this one. So, are you going to be able to write about this eventually?
Hopefully, we'll find out.
Right.
We'll find out. We are campaigning very hard.
It's really
point,
cool.
So.
So, it's really cool. So, all right. Also with us, the first time at least on the State of Control, but not a stranger to these parts. Actually, he's my webmaster. He's the guy that makes all the web stuff go round and round. His name is Matt Scott. He's a totally awesome AV tweep. If you're watching the video, from Omega Audio Video, my buddy and my pal. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. How are you guys? Glad to be here.
Good. And we're talking lighting. That's why we have Matt on, because he is the. Well, seriously, in all seriousness, Matt has been after me for years to try Lutron lighting, and I've done a little bit, I will admit, some interfacing. And actually, every time I do that, I call that man right there and say, I'm stuck. And he's like, just do this and this and this. And last but not least, Chris. Chris is from Lutron themselves, speaking of Speak of the Devil. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Tim. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Do me a favor, pronounce for everyone your last name, because I almost butchered it there.
It would have been more fun if you had given it a shot first. It's Sobowleski.
Sobowleski. Okay.
Sobowleski.
Funny, you don't look Russian, but okay.
Enrico Palazzo.
All right. So, I mentioned this before. We're going to talk about lighting. Actually, lighting, shades, some HVAC. Maybe get into some backnet at the end of it if we have time and if we feel adventurous, I guess. But first, let's kick it off. And Matt, I want to kick it off with you because you are, like I mentioned before, you're my go-to guy when it comes to lighting and specifically interfacing with Lutron. But you are probably the biggest evangelist I know for home and home automation lighting and doing all this stuff. You posted a picture on Facebook the other day of this wonderful, wonderful wall.
That wonderful hotel wall.
Yes. And it had 9 or 10 sliders.
Oh, no, it was more than that.
Was it more than that? And you're like, if anybody needs, home automation lighting, this poor sucker does. So first of all, when you go into a meeting with a client, what are some of the requirements? What do you lay out for the client when you say, you know what, here's a situation where you might want to consider, all kidding aside, not having a dozen sliders, but maybe they don't have a dozen sliders. Maybe they have one or two. What are some of the requirements when you start talking about automating your lighting?
Well, it's one of those things where you need that conversation to come up, and it usually starts with the conversation or the statement of, okay, especially when we're doing other automation, when it's not a standalone system, you kind of just start with, all right, so we're controlling your HVAC, we're controlling your media, we're controlling your shading, or whatever else is going on. How are you going to control your lights? And most times, if the client is not prepared for that, they give you that deer in the headlights look of, with like a light switch. And that as soon as they say that, that gives you the opportunity to get in the door and start to really tell the story of lighting control and explain why you want to control your lights, why the oldest device, especially in the home, that hasn't changed is the light switch. It's on or it's off. Yeah. You would not deal with that in your oven, in your water temperature. You wouldn't want to jump into a shower and either have it boiling or freezing. You want to be able to adjust that same when you're cooking. You have to adjust all of these things. But with lighting, that seems to be one of those things that just hasn't happened. So once you get into that, that gives you the opportunity to really start to talk about how the space can dramatically change with a little bit of lighting control. And each location, each job, each project is different, and kind of you have to tailor that conversation to that specific project. But like right now, for example, we're working on a kitchen, large kitchen automation system and all this other fun stuff, and lighting has played a foundational part in how we're discussing not only actual room design, but the lighting design and how we're going to design that room to operate in cooking mode, in prep mode, in cleanup mode, in entertaining mode, because these clients do a lot of entertaining and they do a lot of cooking. So that room is becoming the focal point of where people will congregate. So we get into again, just how lighting can change that, and how you don't want a wall full of Acme. You want a couple of keypads and a little bit of control so that you can come in and you push a couple of buttons and stuff happens, and you can create that atmosphere and that drama that a switch won't give you.
All right, Rich, you're also a very good, accomplished residential designer and programmer. If they're not ready, if they do give you that deer in the headlights look, like Matt said, how do you tell that story? How do you prepare them for that story and for that conversation? Because, not to be blunt about it, but what we're talking about is more than a 50-cent, light switch from Lowe's or Home Depot. This is, it's a process, and it's a, it can be, a little bit costly if they're not prepared for that. So how do you walk them down that trail?
Well, the first part is there's a whole lot of unreasonable fear when it comes to lighting control, often that we encounter, and the reason being is, Matt just mentioned, is like, this light switch has been around for 100 years. Exactly, it's been around for 100 years. It's proven technology. The light switch is either on or off, and typically in residential, and again, it's changed now. I mean, look at just the past 2 years with every Kickstarter that's come out. Yeah. But let's just go back 5 years, and you look, and lighting control was something that was primarily more used in larger residences or in estate control, or when you got a lot of light switches. It's not, we're not talking like one fixture in one room in a 2,500 square foot house. You're talking 400 loads in a 10,000 square foot house, and people had horror stories. I mean, let's just also face it about our industry. As we were maturing, several of the manufacturers, I mean, there's kind of a big four that have been around in lighting controls for a long time. They've all had their hiccups, and much like our automation systems, we've all had our hiccups. It's invariably never the system, the hardware itself, that was the problem. It was the deployment, more often than not, that you would run into creating the horror story. And so what would happen is, like I said, this unreasonable fear, this, oh my gosh, my friend, who built his house 4 years ago, he had one of those systems, and it was a disaster. It's like this happened, and we couldn't turn it on, and we were sitting here in the dark, and the kids crying, and it's like, oh, we don't want to do that. And that first part is, yes, this is, the way that we walk into it is that home automation or automation systems in general, whether it's lighting control, environmental control, entertainment control, needs to be as ubiquitous as a light switch. You need to be able to take it for granted, right? My job is to make sure that you walk up to this and you don't stop and think, is this going to work or not? You just treat it as an absolute. And that's the first part. And then it goes back to explaining, and here's how we're going to get to that point. And this is where we will use technologies to help you. And then, you step people through what I call their pain thresholds, their automation pain thresholds, which is, here's step A, which is, this is technology that we've had around for at least a decade or more, right? We've broken it every way possible, Step one, that's kind of the main edge, the straight edge of automation. Then the next step that we're going to move over towards is what we call the leading edge of technology. And this is technology that maybe we've had less than 5 years. We don't have as many of them out in the wild, but we've had a lot of successes. We've been able to document it. We've been able to see what goes wrong and how we fix it. And, there's a lot of features in this that you don't get necessarily in the step below that are really, really cool that we think that you'd enjoy. Then you take it to the next step with them and we go, okay, here's bleeding edge technology. Now at this point, there's a bit of a risk. You're going to be growing with this system. But it means that you're getting absolutely the pinnacle of the technology that we have at this point. We're giving you everything we got. At the same time, we don't necessarily know what it's going to do at times. So you might want to have to live with it. And at that point, then we start determining, where are your thresholds at this point? You might be able to get away with it with your TV turning on and off, but you're not going to get away with it with the kids' nursery lights maybe working or not, or X, Y, or Z. And so, again, it's like everything else. It's a human approach. Technology is intended to assist and facilitate. It's not intended to complicate. And I think that what happens a lot of times in our industry, we lose sight of that. And we worry more about the gadgets and the coolness of the gadgetry rather than we're solving a problem. And the problem is, X, Y, or Z. You have tons of lights all over the place. And you know what? Let's talk about your power bill. Let's talk about your consumption. Let's talk about, what kind of ecological footprint do you want to generate? Where do you want to go with these things in terms of the entertainment side versus being responsible, being ecologically aware, being energy conscious, all of these things, as it deals with lighting in this case, which is what we're talking about. It's again how, I kind of go over it and over it as technology is just something I use. Technology isn't something necessarily that I like. And so with that, we're there to solve problems and working them through. Here is something that it can make your life easier and it make it beautiful again. And there's something about being able to create a properly lighted room that's breathtaking at times. I mean, it's an experience. And when you can connect to that and also solve problems and save money and ... then people start going, okay, now it makes sense. But if you just come in and go, hey, look, I can turn my lights on and off with an iPhone, they don't care.
No.
They really don't.
No. All right, Chris, from the manufacturer standpoint, Rich and Matt both mentioned the pain points and some horror stories that some folks have. How do you walk or help your dealers walk clients through some of the pain points and some of the scariness of automating lights and shades and stuff like that?
Well, I think that Matt and Rich did a pretty good job of outlining some of the horror stories. We've definitely seen in the past, plenty of occasions where systems were put in and they caused problems, and it gave lighting control a bad name. And so now, we've had an uphill battle over the past to try and get to a point where people kind of accept it. In most homes, people have never lived with lighting control. They don't really know how much benefit there is, and so it's up to us to do a lot of work on the back end to make sure that really what they're having installed is appropriate for them, and it's going to enhance their life. Rich talked a little bit about it. This is very different than programming a touchscreen, for instance, which is that's done a very specific way. When you're creating a lighting control scene that's going to include lights and shades, you're creating an experience, a mood. It creates a drama in that house. And so it's a little bit of a different take for an AV guy to start thinking about things in that way and giving the customer that kind of experience. You have to go into things thinking a little bit differently. There's also a little bit of a different type of planning that has to be done. In the case of a lighting control system, you need to plan out ahead of time, exactly where the lighting circuits are going to be pulled to, where are they going to bring all of the panel-based products to, how are the shade pockets going to be installed, how deep are they, what sizes are they, but also things that touch the end user, like the keypad placement. You can really screw a system up by just having keypads put in the wrong places where they're not, the most intuitive and easy to access. So there's a lot that goes into considering the flow of the house, whether it's new construction or retrofit. How is the customer going to use that home, and where are they going to get the most bang for the buck out of the touchscreen, the keypad, so that they're going to be able to activate their lights as they're moving through the space. And then you're also going to consider things like guest areas. In a guest area, do I want to have a big scary keypad for grandma to use? It's probably going to scare her away. She's not going to want to push those buttons. So in those guest areas, does it make sense to put a standard dimmer on the wall so that it's kind of easy for her? And then in the more common areas, you put your keypads. And then another piece that's a little bit different, I think, for a lot of AV guys who are just getting into lighting control are working with things like colors and finishes. You're dealing with things that you're not exactly used to all the time. Having to work with a designer to put different colors on the wall or choosing different fabric types for a shade. I think those are a lot of the things that guys who are new to installing lighting and shades kind of stumble on, and it takes a little bit of getting used to.
All right. Steve, Chris mentioned or made reference to this, the programming part of this. How does this, compare this to whether it's a house or it's an office building? Compare, controlling lighting and automating lighting to, I don't know, a switcher or a DVD player or something like that.
Sure. From a commercial standpoint, the amount of options are probably a lot less. But what goes into programming lighting is not only the ability to raise and lower your lights and be able to recall preset scenes, but also from a programming standpoint, you want the ability to make those adjustments in the back end. So it's kind of a twofold programming exercise. You do need to be able to have options for you need to make your programming not only support the actual initiation of the controls, but also the configuration of the controls so that you can make adjustments. And it may be a situation where different times of year you have the sun shines differently through the windows, so you need to be able to adjust those levels because the preset may not be as effective. So it's a little bit more of a complex story, and a lot of times, from a programmer's perspective, when you're just looking at it from an AV system, the recall of presets is very straightforward. Yeah. The recall of raising and lowering shades, but put it into the mindset of how does this all work to create a scene, and just like we were saying, it's a scene and it's an experience, and bringing things to the appropriate level to enhance what you're actually doing in the room. Video can very easily be impacted in a commercial space by how much light is coming into the room, and do you have a projector? Do you have a flat screen? Where is that light shining? And video conferencing it can be night and day if you don't have the right lighting.
Absolutely, you can. All right, so let's talk about something that we've talked about on this show and throughout our network is standards and making sure that we all kind of honestly, it comes down to making sure that all of us as AV professionals deliver a consistent experience for our customers. Chris, is there anything that Lutron has done or that you guys can do when it comes to making sure that there are best practices or I don't know if it's a white paper or what have you, where you guys can say, as Lutron says, you know what, as you're going into the client, this is what we would like to see you do, or these are the best practices when installing, or when you're programming, or when you're automating. Is there something that you guys can do or have done?
Oh, absolutely. You mentioned white papers. We have white papers and we have application notes that kind of, step a new programmer, a new dealer through the process of, developing a project in such a way that it really makes the most sense for the homeowner. And it's really a very big part of our training programs as well. When new dealers come into our training programs, they're not only taught about the pieces and parts and, how many watts can go on this dimmer, but also how to make the experience for the customer. So that's a part of every training, but we also have classes that are specialized in that. In our Radio Raw 2 product, we have a level 3 training course that really takes a dealer through everything from, how do I design a keypad the proper way? How do I make it intuitive? How do I set it up such that, the top button is consistent in every room throughout the house? All those sorts of things that are really gonna make the end user, thrilled with the system that they end up with. So I think it is incumbent on the manufacturers to make sure that we're doing a good job of allowing or offering these trainings to our dealers and getting that information out there, because I think when we do that, we all win. The installer wins, the homeowner wins, and ultimately the manufacturer wins.
Rich, from a programmer and you called yourself a digital concierge at one point. I still like that. What are some of the best practices you've kind of picked up over the last years?
I think it was brought up, which is consistency, in that you don't want to overcomplicate the process. The first, I think the rookie move a lot of times when whether it's lighting control, whether it's AV control, touch panels, whatever it is, I think the inexperienced move is to go, well, I've got a 12-button keypad. I need to give them all 12 buttons. They got to have it. What do you mean? I've got so much. I have to give it to them.
Just give them a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And a puppy and a triple espresso. Yeah, and let them go. The thing that we've learned over time, and that doesn't get discussed often enough, is restraint. And not, the running tagline with technology is it's not if you could do it, it's if you should do it. Mm-hmm. And you constantly have to be asking yourself that question. It's not about what I could do. Let's talk about what we should do. When you walk into this room, and again, keep in mind we can always change this. There's, engraving is easy, and buttons we can swap out, or if you don't like the color, let's set all of that aside. Let's talk about, again, your life. Lighting control, much like automation control, is simply the act of distilling complicated functions to the lowest common denominator, right?
Yeah.
On, off, high, medium, low. Booking, going away, I'm home, and then approaching each room as I constantly tell this story with people. I was like, we're creatures of habit, and I can bet you that if we just talked about your morning routine, I can almost guarantee that 9 times out of 10, you perform the same functions without fail, right? You're going to get up, you shower, maybe you grab your coffee, you sign all of these things, you get dressed, your keys are over here, you get in the car, you turn on, you do X, Y, and Z without fail. So let's talk about how we can facilitate that, how we can get you from point A to point B. Same when you come home. Chances are you probably come home within a plus or 30-minute time range. So let's consider, one of the things that we talk about is like, look, when you turn on the lights at 9 a.m. and that's a completely different reaction you want to get than if you turn the lights on at 3 a.m. Now, granted, you get to about 40-something years old, sometimes I got to get up at 3 a.m. and pay a visit someplace. And so the last thing that I want is I don't want my lights at 90%, blaring down right over my headboard. So little things like that, which is let's consider how you're living, and you live differently at different times of the day. You live differently during different seasons. You live differently if you have children or you're an empty nester. Yeah. And again, you work your way back, and again, it's solve problems, solve problems, solve problems, solve problems. The technology is your tool. It's your palette. It's all these other beautiful colors that you get to paint with. But the first thing is solve the problem and exercise restraint. It's like anything. If you look at anything that's well done, it's it's what was it, the quote about the artist is like, he spent his the writer, he spent his whole day writing on his books. What do you do? He said, well, I took a comma out. I mean, that's a matter of focusing on the end result, instead of worrying about all of the gadgets that we got sitting around.
Yeah, there was another artist that said the art is really not in what you add, it's what you take away.
Correct. Work with the white space, man. Operate in the white space.
Oh my, I love your West Coastness. Steve, when it comes to best practices in the commercial world, what are we looking at here?
So one of the things that we get into and stuff that I think excites us from a programming standpoint or a control standpoint is how do we bring systems together, and that's what we do. We integrate, and so looking at lighting and looking at shades and looking at sensors and being able to tie them together and make, as Rich said, make systems easier to use and automate them, but walking into a room and having the lights turn on for you, or making sure that the lighting level is appropriate for the application that you're doing, and also being able to have lighting support the different functions of a particular room. So I was thinking about a situation where you have room combining in a commercial space. It's very typical for the room to change orientation, and the lighting scenes have to be able to support that. So room combining, as separate rooms may have certain types of scenes where the room is combined may have its own unique set of scenes. And I think that all these things need to be taken into consideration when we're looking at lighting, as well as is the room going to be used maybe for a social function rather than presentation, and how does the lighting need to be in that case. But then also looking at the combination of lighting and shades is also appropriate, because we start to get into energy management and things of that nature. And I think that's been a goal to be able to optimize your environmental controls. And I think tying things in together and being able to integrate and make systems simpler or would be the best practices that we run into.
I want to interject one thing that I was just thinking about that we haven't really spoken about, is that part of what we need to do is also learn how to speak to lighting designers. And so one of the things that we haven't talked about, I mean, we're talking about either end user and our side, but generally, especially in residential, the lighting controls person more often than not isn't the lighting designer. They're two completely different disciplines that occur. The lighting designer is responsible for, again, kind of the West Coast thing, but painting with the light, right? They're picking fixtures. They're figuring out whether they need art lighting or they need accent lighting or they need task lighting or all of these things. By the time you get to the control side, you've already gone beyond, you may already be in a hole at that point. And so one of the important things is being able to relate to the lighting designer, and a lot of them are really hip to it now. I mean, any qualified lighting designer that I've dealt with, absolutely knows, what they want to accomplish with lighting control, but generally they're not the ones programming it. So like what Steve was saying, which was, bringing all of these things together is constantly being that liaison to the designer who is, generally got the client's ear, whether it's corporate or residential. Mm-hmm. They're the ones who've got the client's ear and their tastes and their style needs. And so making sure that you are working actively with the creative side of lighting is I think is extremely important.
Just as we always try to get the control programmer a seat at the table, I think the lighting programmer needs to have a seat at the table too, because we all need to have the collaboration, I think, to provide the solution.
Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, and if I can add on just a little bit more, I think one of the ways that we're seeing our dealers build their businesses today is, by working with lighting designers, architects, builders, and really reaching out and making those connections. It's getting them in on the projects much sooner, so they have a lot more of input into how things are designed. They're creating that linkage early on, and it helps them surround the job and stay on the project. It makes for a better project in the end. And I think what they're finding is not only is it building their job, because they're reaching out to the builder and getting on a specific job with them that they already have contact with the homeowner, but once you get in there, that builder, that architect, that lighting designer is often going to bring you along if you prove that you're doing a great job for them. So I think it's really an important part of growing your business as a dealer.
All right, let's take a slight little turn here, Matt, and start with you because you live not only in residential but also in commercial and a lot of house of worship. There has been bones over the last few years about making sure that AV is green and making sure that we're efficient energy wise. How does that conversation start, or is that where is lighting where that conversation starts? When we start talking about automation and control, where we can say, what, like Rich mentioned, you don't want the lights at 90% at 3 o'clock in the morning. So here's how we can help you. How does that conversation start?
I think honestly that is where the conversation starts, and unfortunately, too often that conversation is started without a lighting control company involved. It usually starts with, especially looking at the house of worship market, them looking up and going, okay, well, we've got a bunch of 200 watt 8-inch hot lights. We're going to switch them all to CFLs or LEDs and still have no control whatsoever, just a ceiling full of lighting. It's something where, especially as LED has become such a big part of most people's thought process is, hey, we're going to save some money, we're going to put all of our lighting to LED. That's really where the expertise of companies like ours and companies like Lutron and the other manufacturers really come into play, because as any of us who work in this know, LED is a real fun area to play. There's currently, and Chris is smiling because he knows, there's currently really no main standards for what bulbs have to be or what they should be and how they're controlled, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, as you start looking at going green, that kind of seems to be the big thing is, hey, we're gonna swap out all these fixtures for more energy efficient fixtures, but we're not always going to look at how we control those fixtures as well. Hence that picture I tweeted the other day. They had a lot of LEDs and they had no control, and the fun part was they had a bunch of those on dimmers that weren't rated. The dimmers weren't rated properly, as well as the bulbs weren't rated properly. So I went in and, just because it's me, I'm playing around, looking around the corner, seeing what the dimmers are doing, and hearing the dimmers buzz, and then watching the lights, drop maybe 20 points before they just shut off or flicker or do their thing. And that's where, again, guys like us, we can come in and, hopefully be a part of that energy savings conversation and help steer it into a way of, this isn't something that you can just go to Home Depot or your big box store or even your big box lighting store and buy an LED bulb or a CFL or what have you and instantly save energy. Yes, you will, but there are a lot of other aspects that come into play as far as making sure your color temperatures stay consistent and your CRI are all the same and all that fun stuff. And, as I said, this kitchen project we're currently working on, I've pretty much lived the last couple of weeks back and forth in Lutron's LED report card center. And you laugh, but it's where I've lived, because we're speccing tape and we're speccing all these other fixtures, and I'm trying to ensure that they're all going to function the way I, as the designer, who is an L3 certified guy, just so we're all clear.
And what is that, for clarification, for those of us who don't know?
The L3 is Lutron's Radio Raw 2 design credential.
There we go.
Saying that we're pretty much top tier in that Radio Raw world. But notwithstanding, I'm kind of living there, going through and making sure that half of the designer bulbs or half of the designer fixtures that were spec'd by the designer aren't going to operate the way I, as the lighting designer, want them to operate in the space. So we're going back and we're checking all of these fixtures against all of our dimmers and all of our systems to make sure that they're going to work the way we want them to work. And then from there, you can do whatever you want, and you can save a ton of energy and maintain that lighting scene, that atmosphere that you're trying to create with your lighting products.
Interesting. Okay, so let me ask this, and Chris, we'll get to you here in a second because I want to get the manufacturer's view of the whole saving energy. Steve and Rich, I want to bring you guys in though, because from the commercial end, and then Rich will bring you back around to talk about residential again. Is this something where you can have the conversation with the client and say, or the lighting designer or whoever it is, and say, you know what, we can save you X amount of dollars. We can pay for ourselves. Is that what we're talking about here, or is it just one of these things where it makes the client feel good because they're saving energy? Steve, we'll go with you on this one.
Well, from a commercial standpoint, I think it needs to be looked at as not just a single room. It needs to be more of a enterprise-wide initiative. And when you start to multiply rooms, then yes, you're definitely there's some cost savings there. The key is that you have to be able to measure it in order to be able to show them that you're actually making a difference. So if you have those systems in place, and it is an initiative of the organization, then I think that it's a very easy thing to be able to convey and to be able to fulfill. It's the same as why do you shut off your projector? After a certain amount of time? Well, because you don't want to burn the bulb out. And why? Because the bulb costs money, and it's also an inconvenience, and you have to pay for a service call and so forth. So it's just the same type of thing. When somebody leaves the room, shut the lights off, but also try to manage the lighting within the space so that you can create some efficiencies.
Not to be simplistic, I'm simply asking because I don't know. Can you measure it? Is this something where you can, whether it's with a control system or not, can you measure it and give the client a report saying we saved X amount of dollars or X amount of power? I'm asking. I don't know.
The easy answer is yes, but it has to be. But of course you have to have the infrastructure to support it.
Matt's laughing at me.
I am, because especially in the residential world, that's the question we get asked every single time we go into it. Oh, well, what's my ROI on this? When is this going to save me enough money?
A homeowner asks, "What's your ROI?" Are you kidding me?
Every time. Yeah, because what they do is as soon as they start to read it, and you got to remember, that's what a lot of the more consumer styled or designed light switch products, and that's what all of our smart meters are all pushing is, you can pay this off in this amount of time, you're using it for this. Yeah, so we do get the ROI all the time on it. And again, you got to remember, we're not, as a rule, selling a $10,000 to $100,000 lighting control system to your everyday homeowner. A lot of times, these are professionals, they're business owners, they're guys who understand ROI. And lighting is one of those things that it's very hard, especially residentially, to specify an ROI, and I've been told many times in many training classes to never touch that topic, to leave it alone.
I don't blame them.
Well, because it's one of those things. I can design a lighting system to save you across the board, say 30-35% of your usage, because we're going to dim those levels, etc. There's nothing to stop you as Johnny homeowner to come in and hit the stinking high button on every keypad, even though it's all time clocked and it's all set to your schedule and we're dimming everything down. I still have clients to this day that 9 times out of 10 they won't hit any of their design scene buttons. They hit their bright button and push everything to 70 points or 80 points because that's what they want, or they pull out their app and turn every single light on. And so when you look at that, it's very hard to say, okay, well, this system is going to pay you back or save you this much money, because it is so dependent on the user's use of that system. So
I think Matt.
Go ahead, Chris.
Matt, you hit it right on. I mean, in a residential application, it is really difficult to show ROI. It's so user dependent. In commercial applications, things are so much more automated. It's much easier to be able to, to gauge energy efficiency on those projects. And so it's much easier to calculate a payback on a commercial project. You can get down in the 2 to 3 year range on a commercial project, and there are tools created to be able to even monitor that energy usage throughout the day. You can pull up different reports that'll show, a facility manager, for instance, how much energy they've been using throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month, throughout the year, and really help them to understand where their energy is going. But, it's very much a commercial usage at this point.
Rich, I'm going to bring something back around what something that Matt just said about, we don't install these lighting systems, these $10,000, $100,000 lighting systems in your average everyday person's house.
We do if it's Caseta.
Well, yeah. you got the money, I'll install it any way you want,
Plug.
Where do you, it's, okay, I'm having a difficult time asking this question. Is there a Home Depot version of this? Is there a Lowe's version of this? Or is this something where, lighting control and automation simply is out of the reach of the middle class and below? And this is something where you don't talk to somebody unless they have a 10,000 square foot house.
No, I don't think that's true at all. I think the opposite. I think that, let me give you a perfect example. All right, so, I don't have a big house. It's, it's a nice size house, but it's not huge. It's not, I don't live in my client's styles houses, right?
Yeah.
So, true story. So 7 years ago, I bought the house, completely gutted it, new electrical, just blah, 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 did all these things. I didn't have lighting control in my house for 6.5 years, because it was just one of those things that I'm like, oh, I get to it. And so, rewind to like Christmas of last year or something like that. I've had these light switches sitting around. I finally got to the point where I'd keep walking into my dining room and I got like a 3-banger. I'm like, nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Nope, that's not it. Right. Keep in mind, for 6 years.
You do know what you do for a living, right?
I know, and this is my point. I finally got to the point where, and again, I live in California, and they pummel you on your energy costs. And so I feel like a sitcom dad these days. Trey, our featured correspondent, yes, every once in a while. And my wife, God love them. Obviously, nobody in my family understands that light switches have an off button. So I feel like the sitcom dad running around every place going, turn off the lights, who left the lights on, who left the... I did it from a peace of mind standpoint where I was like, okay, I focused on 6 odd years after the fact, the rooms that were important to me, that I wanted to just have them turn off, and just be able to, again, it's all that functionality. Now, I happen to use one company's light switches who, obviously are easier for me to program. But there's nothing to say that I couldn't have used, anybody else's light switches and retrofit them after the fact. Sometimes the hurdle though with lighting control is that, again, it's not supposed to be touched by anybody other than a licensed electrician. You're dealing with something where you plug a speaker in wrong, maybe it doesn't sound right. You start rolling around with pliers and wire strippers, and you've got a hot load, and somebody's delivering a eulogy. So, but again, let's take a look. Is that it's like anything else, anything that's kind of life safety related. You want to take a little bit more of a measured approach with it. And then I was talking, I think maybe when we were opening with talking about, Kickstarter, right now, kind of that's the new thing, they're all environmentally control based, whether it's lights or HVAC or anything like that. Those are options that are going to become available. But I think, again, it often takes the wrong approach. It's taking a gadget approach to, oh, yeah, well, when you put one in, yeah, that's kind of cool. You can turn it on and off. You get to 20, 30, 50 of these things. What are you going to do? How? Again, you're now back to me just with a pretty screen going, nope, that's not it. Well, nope, that's not it. Oh, nope, that's not it. Do you open up an app with 75 switches on it? So, we keep going back to, can it be done in the middle class house? The 4.2 kids and the dog and the car and the whole thing. Yes, it can. It is just a different approach, which is to say, look, you don't have to bite it all off now. Let's focus. Let's ease you into it and create value, because at that point then they see the purpose behind it. They start driving it, as opposed to a lot of times, you come in and, like Matt was saying, a $10,000 or $100,000 or whatever the amount is. That's a lot to chew off initially, and it's not because they won't spend it. It's just because they don't understand why they would spend it. And so it goes back to those irrational fears. It's like this money pit. Well, I got lights that work. Why do I want an automated one? Well, if they're not relating to it, then it's just throwing good money after bad at that point. So a big part of it comes back to, again, here's where it actually makes a difference. You may have some savings, yeah, but a lot of it still stems around, especially in residential, convenience. It's like anything else, is that it's just, there will be some savings down the line, but it's an initial investment and there's an upfront cost to it. But it's just like changing out all your light fixtures from incandescents to LEDs. Yeah, you're going to get savings over time, but it's not going to be a 1-year ROI, because those fixtures aren't cheap right now.
No.
So, you have to gauge with people where their values come from. Saving money is one thing, but do they want to be responsible? Do they want to be over the life of living in the house? Do they want to be able to accrue those savings? Like, why do solar? Solar is expensive up front too, but a lot of people are doing it because there are lots of positive benefits to that technology. And that's kind of how I lump lighting in that same feeling, which is, you can be a good citizen and still have the creature comforts.
Okay. Go ahead, Matt.
Well, you touched on two things that I think are kind of the most important parts of, especially guys that currently aren't doing lighting control or just, getting their toes wet, just jumping in, is that this is different than, again, you see a ton of AV guys getting into this. They see the dollar signs, they see the money amounts of these systems, and they get very excited, as they should. But this is not the same as programming a remote control or a small automation system. Lighting is a life safety device. Mm-hmm. It's not something to mess around with. If you don't know what you're doing, you shouldn't be touching it, because there is something to be said for, in an emergency, you need your lights to work. Mm-hmm. You cannot, if your TV, system doesn't work, or your boardroom doesn't function properly, you can't get your AirPlay to work, that's not a big deal. In the event of an emergency, if you can't get your lights to turn on because somebody didn't program it right or did something incorrectly, that's a very, very big deal. Then the other aspect of it as well is that, so often we see guys come in and start to do some lighting control, and they put a switch in this room and they put a switch in that room, and they're trying to create usually some form of, home off system where they can turn half the lights off in the house that are used most often. And, again, this is something that you also see a lot in that entry level market point. Lighting control really should be focused on doing one room and doing that room right. And then once you do that room right, move on to the next room and do that room right. And, there's a whole story behind, how shading has become such a major part of lighting control, and how you need to control all sources of light to actually achieve lighting control. You don't have lighting control if you do all your hi-hats and a pendant, but you don't do your table lamps and your floor lamps. That's not lighting control. That's controlling a couple of lights. And there's a difference to that. And that's what we see most often with the beginners who are jumping into this and don't really know what they're doing. And also with the Home Depot based systems, whether it's the Kickstarter stuff or the Wemo stuff or whoever, is they'll do a couple of lights and not the whole thing. So the clients, whether it's a homeowner or whether it's someone who purchased it from an installer, they don't get the full effect. They don't get a functional system in all intents and purposes, and then they get disappointed with the concept of lighting control. And that's kind of one of the biggest things that we, as good installers and good dealers, need to work with and overcome, is these guys that don't understand the concepts and don't understand really how systems should work. And that's where trainings from any of these manufacturers are so key to get in and fully understand not only the technical data, because so many of us are such tech heads that that's all we care about. We care about the numbers. How many, of these bulbs can I put on this dimmer? How many of these go into a proper room? And lighting control is a lot more artistic than that. It really is. It's more, akin to touch panel design, GUI design. You have to design systems that are functional and make sense, not from a technical standpoint, but usually from a way you live your life, a way your client lives your life.
Okay. All right. That'll be a good way to end it. Real quickly, I'm going to give each of you a opportunity. Give me an elevator pitch, whether it's for the commercial or residential or whatever. Chris, we'll start with you. Why should I do lighting control or automation?
Well, Tim, I think it's pretty easy. It's lighting control is about convenience, making your life more convenient, ambiance, making things look just right in your house. It's about safety and security, lighting a pathway into the house, or having your security system trigger your lighting controls in the event of a trip or something like that. And then I think coming to light, most recently is energy savings. Lighting control, shading, and HVAC can all tie together, and really save a lot of energy in a home. It makes people feel good. They may have a 10,000 square foot home with a Prius parked out front, but that's their way of feeling okay about what they're doing. And so I think lighting control, shading, HVAC is just another way to help them save energy. And it's one of the few things out there that not only saves energy, but it enhances your lifestyle as well. It gives you, this dimming capability, this scene making capability. Most times when we hear about energy saving devices, we think, oh, it's not going to perform as well. That's not the case with lighting, shades, and HVAC.
Okay. All right, Mr. Fregosa, give me an elevator pitch. Why should I do lighting control?
Chris, basically went over the same points that I would go, which is, this is an opportunity to be ecologically responsible, and at the same time improve the quality of your life at home. Over time, not immediately, but over time, it actually will wind up being a cost savings just over the fact that it will take care of things that you forget to do. And the whole point about any of these systems is to take the common things that you do every day and streamline them to basic functions like I'm home, I'm going away, I'm waking up, I'm going to sleep. And this is a tool that allows us to give you that flexibility in your home. And to be able to enjoy it. It's like anything else, is that you've put all of this effort into the house itself, into the architecture and the styling and everything else. This is just another supporting feature of the house. And again, much like Chris is saying, I use kind of the same pitch, which is, look, just the same way that I say you're putting solar panels up there and you just bought a Tesla something or other because they are a little bit more green. This is another way to still be green. It's kind of like glamping, you're not going completely rough and tumble. You're not roughing it completely, but you can still go ahead and put something in that you don't feel like you're just throwing away money or being irresponsible. It allows us to give you the best of both worlds.
Yeah. All right, Mr. Scott, what's your pitch on why should I do lighting control?
Lighting control is really the only energy savings device that actually makes your life better. It allows you to paint your space with light, highlight the things you want to draw focus to. It gives you the opportunity to transform your room, no matter what you're doing, into the best lighting, the best atmosphere for that event, whatever it is. It's something that gives you the convenience and control that you can't find in anything else. It is the number one device that you're going to use in your house on a daily basis. Why not add some control to it?
Okay. All right, Steve, you've got the last word on this. Why should I do lighting control?
These guys are tough to top.
I know.
So what I would say is that you have to look at it similar to audio and video. You don't want either of those to be bad. You also don't want the environment to be bad, and I think that the sum of all the components make up a good system. And when we're looking at audiovisual automation, all of those are vital to providing the user experience.
Okay. All right. Well, that will do it for us. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. Thank you for listening and watching. Chris Sobowleski from the Great Lutron. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Where can people find out more about you or more about Lutron?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say well done on my last name for only having heard it once.
Well,
you pronounced it just right. Lutron, obviously, www.lutron.com. They can come and find all the info they need about us right there.
All right. Also with us is Matt D. Scott, Omega Audio Video, and a host of other things. He's a writer for SAN. He's my webmaster. He's my buddy and my pal. Thank you, sir.
Oh, touched. Thanks. I love being here. Always happy to talk lighting control.
Where can people find you or Omega?
You can find me at mattdscott.com or Matt D. Scott on pretty much any social network, as well as OmegaAudioVideo.com.
All right. Rich Fregosa, FregosaDesign.com. Where can people find you, sir?
You can find me on the interwebs at fregosadesign.com, or you can get onto Twitter and go right there at our Fregosa.
Well, those of you listening.
Yeah, for all two of our viewers. You can also find me at, pretty much, just type my name into Google, and it seems that I'm appearing with regularity either on CE Pro or on here with our friends at AVNation.
Yep, absolutely. All right, last but not least, Steve Greenblatt, Control Concepts. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Always a good show, and I'm glad we were able to do a topic that can appeal to another part of our audience. You can reach me, my company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net, and I'm on Twitter and LinkedIn and other social media at Steve Greenblatt.
Very good. All right, don't follow me. Go by the website, because Matt D. Scott, the lighting guru, also does a very fabulous job on our website, AVNation.tv. AVNation.tv, you'll find this program and a host of others. We have some new blogs posting this week and a very interesting announcement on Wednesday. So go by the website October 1st. By the way, if you're not aware, Infocom typically will do like a week during the month of October to celebrate all things AV. They're doing an entire month this year. So October is AV month. So celebrate as you would. Actually, check out Corey Schaefer from Listen usually does some interesting things, and some other companies do it well. So yeah, AVNation.tv, AVNation.tv. Thanks so much for listening. Thanks so much for watching. This has been A State of Control.